Appreciate your patience while Anita got connected back up. Just a couple quick notes. If you have questions, feel free to submit them in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. I will keep track of them, and we'll have Anita run through them at the end of the session. If you run into technical difficulties, please shoot me a quick message in that same box, and we'll do our best to help you from here. And with that, we will let Anita get started.
Oh, thank you for your patience. You know, sometimes technology does not serve us well. So I'm in Wichita, Kansas, doing this webinar, and the building I was in, all of their internet went down, and I had no way to connect with you. So they picked me up and drove me to my hotel, and here we all are. And today is part 1 of 2 series, and the title is What Makes Specialized Instruction Special? And I want to just tell you how this came about. I had 3 people make requests for this webinar. One person said, I wish you would go back over the chapter 1 in terms of the elements of instruction and also the principles of explicit instruction. That was the first person who asked. And then a state director in special ed said, I wonder how you would put the elements of explicit instruction in context with RTI or MTSS. How would you do that? And then I was at a conference in Kansas, where I still am, last week for an MTSS RTI conference, a wonderful conference, and had a really great conversation, again, with one of the trainers in explicit instruction saying, I'm always asked, Doc, what is so special about special ed? So I am dedicating this and October 14th to that very question. And even as I look down some of the names, it's a question that you had also. And again, thank you for your patience as we look at this, focusing on chapter 1, but looking at it through the lens of teaching Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention. Now, this was the question. How do the 16 elements of instruction and the principles of explicit instruction introduced in chapter 1 vary across tiers? And so that was the question that was submitted to me, and it was in regard to looking at the tiers of RTI, the tiers of being able to look at it in terms of the MTSS structures. So there's not a person here who's not aware, and since I'm in Kansas, I'm using their logo because they use the term multi-tiered system of supports. And if we just look at this diagram, it has the magic triangle in the middle and says for all children, for some children, and for a few. All students Tier 1 in general ed, and all some of the children that are receiving additional strategic interventions at Tier 2, and a few of them getting very intense interventions at Tier 3. Jackie, I just want to check because there's some questions about the audio. Are you hearing me?
I am hearing you, and Jake was able to get your connection too. I have just put an answer to the question that has the audio broadcast information where people can call in via phone.
Okay, so I'm on my phone today, and I'll be very careful to talk right into it. Okay. Kim says
to answer another quick question that did come up, it is indeed being taped and recorded, so it will be available to watch later on today too.
All right, but we're going to try to get the audio very clear. I'm just checking with you. Is it all right with you?
It is.
All right, good. So this is the Kansas State motto or their graphic that goes along with this. But let's just look at a simple version. And so we all talk about Tier 1 being what's most of the students in general ed in the core, and 2 students that are getting strategic input, and Tier 3, that they are getting intense assistance. Now, if we look at this and we ask the question, what is different from Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3? I think what's most important about, like particularly Tier 3 specialized instruction, is it is a matter of degree. It is a matter of intensity and the amount of time. It's not like it would look totally different and that we wouldn't use all we know about explicit instruction. It is the intensity. So that's why we're going to look at all of the elements of explicit instruction and how we might make each of them more intense for Tier 2 or Tier 3. Why do we have this for 2 weeks, 2 sessions? Because we simply can't finish it up all in one. So we're going to do a portion of it. But this is the big idea, that good instruction is good instruction. That whether I am teaching Tier 1 or Tier 2 or Tier 3, there are certain things that need to be in place in order for it to make the most difference with children. What differs is the intensity, the degree of doing it. And that's exactly what we're going to explore. And I can't wait. I'm going to be certain you have time for questions at the end because of the goals that you're in. So if you remember, we took the first chapter and we had the elements, 16 elements of explicit instruction, divided up into ones related to content, ones related to the delivery or the design of instruction, ones related to the delivery of instruction, and then also ones related to practice. And then we had the other part of the chapter was on the principles of explicit instruction, such as academic learning time. So today we're going to look at content and design of instruction. And next time we will look at, well, what is special about the delivery practice, and also 2 of the elements of the principles of explicit instruction, the use of time and scaffolding. So much of it next time is going to be the research on scaffolding. All right, well, so I'm very excited about this because my original work was in special ed, and then since then almost all of my demonstrations and work has been done in general ed, but it is a reminder to us that it is not so much different, but the degree of intensity that we need to look at. So I hope that you're going to read along with me so that you're actively involved on this beautiful post-Labor Day webinar. So the first element is you focus on critical content. Now this is in general ed, it is in Tier 2, it is in Tier 3, that we would look at skills and strategies, ways of doing things that would really empower children, that we would look at vocabulary and concepts that they could use in the future, that we would teach them rules and facts that would empower them in the future. So, and if we had many vocabulary words, we hone in on the ones that are most likely to read or say or hear. When we teach strategies across all of the tiers, we're looking at strategies that will really lift their performance up. So what's different about it in terms of Tier 2 and Tier 3? Again, remember, it's the degree of intensity. It's not something totally different. So first, as I have long said, if we're looking at intervention, we have to cut the stuff and teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Read that with me. Obviously, I need help today. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. So, for example, in reading, we all know the major areas of reading: phonemic awareness, word recognition, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. And what is different in Tier 2 and 3 is that we hone in on those areas that match the student's needs. For example, I was just working in a project in Michigan with the My Blue project for preschool and kindergarten, a great team effort there. And we honed in on what was appropriate in terms of making it more intense for at-risk students, in terms of phonemic awareness and in terms of vocabulary. So those were chosen for that group because of their level of development and where they were on the reading continuum. However, today, before I talk to you, I was working with middle school teachers who are teaching Rewards and Rewards Plus. Now, their students are Tier 2 students in middle school, and by the time you get to middle school, it's very possible that you have problems in word recognition, particularly multisyllabic words. And because you had difficulty reading the words, you haven't read much, so you have very low fluency. Most of the students were around 60 to 80 correct words per minute, not 150. And then because you haven't read very much, you have low vocabulary, and you have particular challenges in comprehension that is in informational text. So what do we have to do? We used a program, in this case Rewards and Rewards Plus, to fill in the gaps there of multisyllabic words, fluency and automaticity, vocabulary that was domain-specific, social studies and science vocabulary, and comprehension to lift them up. So that here, the instruction is based again on the student's needs, in this case in Tier 2. One of the exciting things I did at the Kansas conference is I went to many of the sessions on math. And you know that most of my work has been in literacy, but I'm trying to expand into math. And so when we look at the research in math, which I will give you some great references for this, but starting with the IES math guidelines for struggling math students, I would recommend. But they might not understand key concepts. They might not know area versus perimeter. They might not have automaticity in facts, particularly addition, subtraction, but also multiplication and division. And they might not have automaticity in doing standard algorithms. And definitely difficulty in terms of problem solving. Now, again, the difference in 2 and 3 is that we might not hone in on all of these, but look at what are the students' biggest needs that are separating them from their peers. For example, when I talked to 3 of the presenters, they said in the youngest grades, the concepts that they're working on are mostly of numeracy, and also automaticity in facts. When they have students in the upper intermediate grades, they're working on their facts, which are not automatic, concepts, algorithms, and then applying them to problem-solving strategies using visualization. So that's kind of the scaffolding we'll get into next time, is how might some of the additional scaffolding perhaps look a little bit different than what we would do in general ed. So in terms of the content is 1, anything that is not essential would not be taught in Tier 2 or 3, or we can't really project that students higher. We cannot accelerate them if there's any fluff time taken for things that aren't absolutely critical. And then we look at their diagnostic information and put them in critical materials that would teach to those needs. Now, one of the things that we also are required to do for any intervention, whether it be Tier 2 or Tier 3, is use evidence-based strategies, evidence-based instruction, evidence-based materials, and so we often would use intervention materials that would be much more specific in many cases than those used in general ed. Well, that's number 1 under content. And the second thing is that we would sequence the skills logically. easier before more difficult, high frequency before low, prerequisites first, similar skills separated. So you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to use, since I also write intervention materials, I'm going to use some of them to illustrate how Tier 2 or Tier 3 materials might look. And so in terms of logical sequencing, it appears to be really critical when we teach foundation skills. Foundation skills in reading, foundation skills in math, where one skill or concept builds on the next, builds on the next, builds on the next. So we can't do this one randomly, out of order. For example, there are some things that the order doesn't make as much difference. For example, if I teach you vocabulary for a passage, and then I teach you vocabulary for another passage, and I teach you vocabulary for another passage, particularly if they're narrative, it probably doesn't matter so much the order of those vocabulary words. But it does make a difference if I am looking at the order of teaching you facts in math, the order of the algorithms in math, the order of the foundation skills in reading, such as decoding, or maybe even phonemic awareness makes a difference. So let's just take an example. So this is from Phonics for Reading, which I was the first author on, and you see the list of sounds that we teach. So the kids already know consonants. This comes from book A, but the students know consonants, and we teach A first and then I. And we teach the sound, then we put the sound into words, and then the words into multisyllabic words, because this is an intervention program, not a general ed program, but an intervention program that might be used with low-performing students in 2nd and 3rd and 4th grade. And so right away, we want them reading long words. And then we have the letter O, and again, we teach the sound, put it into words, put it into multisyllabic words, and then U, and then E. And then we introduce having, well, let's just look at that. So you might say, well, why isn't it A-I-E-O-U? Well, that standard would make I and E together. And one of the things that we know about, let me just go back here for a minute, is that we want to separate things that are very similar that could confuse. Not only do we want to go from easier to more difficult, for example, 2-letter words to 3 to more, and high-frequency sounds before low-frequency sounds, but we want things that are too similar separated. And this makes a difference with students that have struggled because they're less likely to make errors based on the examples that we're using that are too close together. So we continue. They have read consonant, vowel, consonant. Now we're going to have them read consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. But the first ones, like in puff or will, they still only have 3 sounds. And so that makes it easier than having to blend 4 sounds. And when we introduce final consonants like CK, we still only have 3 sounds. So this is just an example of the kind of little bit more care we have to take in the organization, the logical organization of what we're teaching, but also the logical organization of the examples. Well, the last big idea for content, as you remember, was to break down complex skills into smaller instructional units. And so this really becomes critical. Again, remember, it's not that the instruction is significantly different. It is just more intense. So we're going to break down everything into doable, obtainable parts for Tier 1. But in Tier 2, they might have to be smaller. Tier 3, they might have to be smaller. Let me use an example that I used in an earlier webinar where I was teaching a comprehension strategy and a writing strategy. And let's look at the comprehension one first. So if we look at the recommendations for early comprehension that has been put out by the Institute of Educational Science in their practice guides, they suggested that we teach children how to ask themselves questions using keywords such as Who was this about? What did it tell us about Edison? Where did Edison live? When did he live? Why did he do that? How did he go about it? Well, I taught this to a group of third graders with this very passage and demonstrated it. And they had no difficulty with me introducing all of these 6 questioning words because they were already in their lexicon. They were already words that they could use. However, I said to myself, I would definitely have to break this down more if I was going to teach a group that was Tier 2 and definitely Tier 3. For example, perfect example, it might help if I would just start with who and what. Who is this paragraph about? What did it tell us about this person? And do that to mastery. Then I could answer questions such as, well, who was this about? What did it tell us? When did it happen? And where did it happen? And then once we got that down, then I could move on to why did this event occur? How did it progress? So it's just an example of something really critical that's a difference in intensity, not a difference in one of the essential elements of explicit instruction, just the intensity. I'm going to have to be much more thoughtful about making it obtainable by breaking the parts down, setting them up for success. Well, here's another one that came from actual practice, teaching Tier 2 students how to write an argument. And I use this because we wanted to find out what was difficult. Was it planning an argument? Was it transcribing your plan into connected discourse? Was it having a body? Was it having an introduction? Was it having a conclusion? Now, some of you who teach Tier 2 students in intervention are going to say, well, yeah, like all of it. But the point is that we wanted to find that out. And we found out something pretty darn interesting, and that was the problem was not the students planning it, not coming up with the reasons for their claim. The problem was actually taking their plan and transcribing it into connected discourse that could be easily understood. So when we broke this down for use with a Tier 2 group, we started by just doing transcription. We gave them the plan. We said, here's your claim, here are the reasons for it, and we're just going to teach you how to transcribe it into a paragraph with a topic sentence and related details. And once we gave them the plan and they were able to transcribe the body with reasons and details, then we went on and we had them plan and transcribe. So all of this is building step by step. So we are planning it, and then we are going to take that plan and we're just going to write the body. That's all we're going to work on. And actually we wrote 1 body, 2 body, 3 body, 4, 5 body, 6 body, should have been some more. And then we moved on to teaching them how to write an introduction, but they need a lot of mass practice on that. So we wrote not just one introduction, but we wrote for each body an introduction. And then we learned how to do a conclusion, and we wrote conclusions. So first of all, you notice many things. It's broken down into obtainable pieces, but also they're getting a lot more practice. They're not just writing one little argument essay. This is what we mean about the elements are for everyone. The intensity increases as we go up that triangle. Well, then we looked at the design of instruction, and that we would have organized and focused lessons. Now, in many Tier 2 and Tier 3 classes, we'll use research-validated programs, particularly in Tier 3, and they will have organized, focused lessons. And hopefully, they will begin with a clear statement of the goal and our expectations. Now, this is something that actually has a very, very high effect size, something such as little as this. But in Hattie's work, providing the goal had an effect size of 0.50, with 0.40 being what we would consider acceptable in terms of effect size. So we should be telling the kids the goal so that they know what they're to learn, we know what we are to teach, and they are the same. And our whole goal is learning, learning, learning as conveyed in the goal. It's not an activity. No, it is something they are to learn. And so I just plucked out because they could be already folded in to a Tier 2 or Tier 3 program. For example, this is, and I didn't have to get permission to use my own material. So this is from Rewards Writing Sentence Refinement that I did with Mary Gleason and my good friend Steve Isaacson. And we put in a goal statement and also a rationale for it. So the students are learning how to take two sentences and combine them. And though the teacher can utilize similar wording or this wording, they would say, you're going to practice polishing sentences by combining two or more ideas to form an interesting sentence. Combining ideas also reduces redundancy, the repeating of information. So I know that we are going to be working on combining 2 or 3 sentences into one to reduce redundancy and to make it more interesting. That's what I know as a student. That's what I know as the teacher. So that is going to be able to guide me as I am learning it. So if our materials don't have a clear statement of the goal, and some of them don't, then we have to have that so that we all are certain exactly where we are going. Well, what other things did we have in terms of instruction? And for some of you I just had this summer, you know these by heart. And so that in the lessons that there would be a review of prior skills and knowledge before beginning instruction on what is new. And it needs to be interactive, and it needs to entail retrieval from your memory information. Now, of course, this would be even more essential. It would be important in a Tier 1 class, important to go back and review the prior skills and knowledge. But when we get to Tier 2 and Tier 3, and we have to work so hard to set the kids up for success, we have to absolutely be certain that they have the prior skills that are necessary for what we're going to learn. And so we have to have very intentional review that's interactive with retrieval. So again, just plucking out an example from some of the intervention programs that I have written with other faculty members, most often with Mary Gleason. This was written with a number of faculty at when I was at university or San Diego State University, and we wrote a program called Phonics for Reading. But let's just look at one way that we infuse review. So the students have learned these sounds, and the script says, let's practice saying the sounds and words that we'll be reading. Okay, so this is prior skills, the pre-skills for what they're doing. Looking at the letters in line 1, say the sounds. So we ask them the sounds. We don't tell them the sounds because we've already taught it. We want them to have to retrieve it. That's going to dig deeper neural pathways and lead to learning. Remember, review should be ask, don't tell. Now, if they make an error, we will tell them what it is and have them repeat it. But we are going to ask it so that they have to retrieve it from their memory and thus have deeper neural pathways that lead to retention. So we have them say the sounds, and then we correct any errors that they've made. So this is just an example of how critical it is for all kids, but particularly for struggling students, that we have that foundation in place. Well, then, of course, we provide step-by-step demonstrations and follow it with guided and supported practice. So this goes right back to the skills or the strategies we as teachers use when we're teaching new information. That we have I do it, we do it, you do it, or demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. And, you know, it always is sad to me that sometimes I'll watch in a general ed class and they will simply have I do it, then you do it, leaving out the guided, supported practice. That would be a big mistake since it is the most powerful part, the we do it. Now, if I teach Tier 2 and I demonstrate it and have them do it, they are definitely at risk. That they need that part where we're guiding them through it, that it truly is I do it, we do it, you do it, so that they are set up for success. So again, I just took out of one of the intervention programs to show how critical this is. I do it, and then we do it before we have you do it. And so this was one lesson that I was teaching in rewards writing. And the students are being taught, just like that goal, how to take 2 sentences, or 3 or 4, and combine them into one. Sentence combining. Now, sentence combining has very good research as a way to improve the quality of elementary writers, of middle school writers, of high school writers, even of college. Right now, if you would come to my house, next to my bathtub is a book of sentence combining, really difficult, designed for high school and college students so that they would learn how to make more sophisticated sentences that would follow the structure of English. So I do a few of them until the water gets cold and then I have to get out. And I will finish the book sometime soon. But it's challenging. And so here we're teaching that. So the students, the teacher says, read the start sentence with me. Everybody read along with me. Many people in Union City are immigrants. Okay? Then read the add sentence with me and do it with me, everyone. The immigrants are from Cuba. And then the teacher, remember this is demonstration. We can have, demonstration is show and tell, but it also sometimes requires responses from the students just to keep them present. So that's why we had them read it with us. So the teacher then says the new idea that's in this add sentence is they are from Cuba. So I underline from Cuba. So now here we're giving them actually a physical prompt of underlining, which of course we would fade out so that they could do this without underlining, but it's a very useful scaffold while we're learning. So I underline from Cuba. Then I model. Next, I combine the 2 sentences. Read the first create sentence with me. Many people in Union City are immigrants from Cuba. So I've added the part that was not in the start sentence, from Cuba. But I might say it in a different way. So read the second create sentence with me. And everybody, many people in Union City are Cuban immigrants. And so instead of saying from Cuba, I use the adjective Cuban. Now here, it is an I do it, my turn. But even though it is my turn, I'm showing the kids how to do it, I'm telling them how to do it, but I'm also getting responses from them so that they will be present with me as I am doing it. Well, that is a demonstration, and we might demonstrate it 1 or 2 times, but even with Tier 2 or Tier 3, we're not going to do I do it, 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 because then only the teacher's getting good at it. Instead, we want to have that gradual release of responsibility and move to a we do it. So let's look at how that might differ. So in a we do it. You guide the students by often telling them the step and having them do it, telling them the step and having them do it. And so here, be my students, read the start sentence with me, everyone. Life in Union City is an adjustment for them. Read the add sentence with me, go. The adjustment is huge. So what is the new idea about the adjustment? It is, everyone, huge. Good, underline huge. Now, create a new sentence and write it in your book. So here, I have guided them. I've gotten them to attend to huge, and they already have practiced combining in the past, so they're going to combine it, but then they're going to get feedback. And, of course, feedback is critical to learning. Much learning occurs when you've taken a risk of doing it, and then you get feedback. So read my sentence with me. Life in Union City is a huge adjustment for them. So just a reminder that if I'm teaching any group and they're learning a new skill or strategy, I'll use I do it, we do it, you do it. But if I'm teaching Tier 2 or Tier 3, I must be have more intensity, but also I must be more precise in it. I have to be really careful about the demonstrations to ensure their success so I can change their achievement and also change their mindset about if I'm a writer or not. All right, well, what else do we have? Remember to get your questions in there. We have also clear and concise language and providing a range of examples and non-examples. Non-examples as necessary, but always a range of examples. So I have an example here that is from a book that is teaching a spelling rule. And I want you just to look down and ask yourself, what are some of the potential misconceptions if I use these to teach the rule of if you have a vowel consonant E and you're adding an ending that begins with a vowel and you drop the E. So I want you just to think for a moment of some of the misconceptions that they might have. So think about it. Okay, here are some that I'm thinking about when I looked at this in a spelling book. First of all, they do at least have single syllable and two syllable root words. Okay, so there's a slight variation, but all the endings are ing. So easily they could think, okay, I'm going to use this whenever I am adding ing. And so then we would see children with like the word seeing, S-E-E-I-N-G, and now they're adding ing to see. Well, they're going to drop the E because they drop the E every time here. So there's two major misconceptions is the ending's always going to be ing, and when you have ing, just drop that E no matter what. Well, that's because there is not a range of examples, and there's no non-examples at all, so that they can make a discernment of when to not employ the strategy. This is a perfect non-example in itself because of the misconceptions that would occur. Now, I want you to look at the next example and think to yourself, what is different? What is different that is going to reduce misconceptions? So look it over, talk to yourself, or if you're with someone else, tell them, but what is different? Okay, see if you have some of the same ideas that I have. First of all, there is a wider range in terms of the roots. Yes, there's a two-syllable root, but there's also some that are simply longer roots. But the big difference is there's much more variation in terms of the endings. So ing, ous, ful, ist, ity. So we have a big range of endings that are being added. Then we also have non-examples. We have ones where you don't drop the E at the end, either because it isn't a vowel consonant E at the end, or because the ending does not begin with a vowel. So shameful and shapeless. But this one even shows another design feature, and that is that in some cases there's what we call a minimal pair, shameful and shamed. Okay, that is meaning that they are just minimally different, just a little bit different. So the students really, really, really have to think about the attributes. The rule is when you have a vowel consonant E and you're adding an ending that begins with a vowel, you drop the E. So shameful, we have a vowel consonant E, but the ending begins with a consonant, so we don't drop the E. But when we have shamed, we have a vowel consonant E, and the ending begins with a vowel. And so we drop the E. Oh my goodness, I really have to think here because there's both examples and non-examples. Now, is it possible that some of our struggling students might come up with more misconceptions in their teaching, that we have to, again, have that level of care, that level of intensity, that level of degree. It's not that the lesson in content is different, but in Tier 1, we're going to have examples, but in Tier 2, we're going to even be more careful about the examples and non-examples that we just propose to ensure understanding. Well, the next one talks about when we're going to meet again, and we're going to be covering much more. So October 14th is part 2 of this. And now I'm hoping that you'll have a rush of questions. Do we have any, Ms. Jackie?
So far, I haven't seen any content-related questions.
They were all on, I can't hear perfectly. So do you have a question out there? We're going to wait a few minutes before we go forward because my intent was that you would probably have a good number of them. Okay, let me suggest something else then. You know, the big idea here, well, first of all, if you've never read the IES Practice Guides for math and for struggling math students or struggling readers, I commend them to you because they're very good reviews of research. And I will have a list of books for people at intervention next time that they could also augment these. But do get these, do read them, and you're going to find that both of them say, ooh, use explicit instruction. Yes, but increase the intensity, the focus of it, so that it does make a difference with our Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids. Now, basically, first of all, this is our first webinar of this year, and so I just hope that you have the very, very, very best New Year's ever, because it is sort of our New Year's as we start in September. But also, I just want to remind you that good instruction is good instruction for all teachers, for all students, for all tiers. The big difference is intensity in terms of Tier 2 and Tier 3. And for all of them, whether it is Tier 1, 2, and 3, it is the quality of my instruction that makes a difference. For really, the motto of our book, the motto of this teaching is, how well we teach equals how well they learn. So if I don't have any questions, which I thought we would have abundance, do we have some?
We do have one question, Anita, which says, can you speak to the power of corrective feedback for students with disabilities?
Well, absolutely. I'll speak to it now, and that is in our next webinar. Our next webinar is on delivery, which will start with frequent responses, monitoring, corrective feedback, positive and negative, and the research on it, as well as the research on use of time and scaffolding. So that is what we're going to cover. But the whole area of feedback, I mean, the effect size of feedback is 0.74 in Hattie's work. That's way, way up there. It means it makes a difference. And when students make an error in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3, we should correct it. We have to absolutely correct it and correct it well when we are working with Tier 2, Tier 3. Because corrective feedback is used when they make an error to fill in the gap from their current performance to desired performance. So we can't just say, well, that's wrong. That doesn't fill in the gap. So we have to say, that word is, and tell them the word, or let's look at these steps together. Watch me do this problem again. Now let's do one together, so that they always end up doing the correct response. But we will go right over what we know from the research in RTI about the power of corrective feedback. We correct all errors, we either tell them the answer, or we guide them to the answer, and they always end up with the correct response.
All right, terrific. Another question, Anita. They are saying that we are doing a lot of your strategies with Tier 1. Our general population consists of very low students, so we become even more intense and focused in Tier 2.
Excellent, absolutely, because if you do them in Tier 1, because of your population, you're going to have fewer kids in Tier 2. And so, yes, then you'll increase the intensity of it. You cut the fluff and teach the stuff. You'd narrow your focus to the foundation skills and that they had most need in, and you would intensify it, because your whole goal would be through your curriculum-based assessment to measure their progress, so that you could say, ooh, this is really making a difference. I'm going to keep working with them, not release them from Tier 2 right away, but keep working with them until it is a consistent progress. And then I will release them back to Tier 1. But yes, I work with many populations where the Tier 1 instruction has to be, because of the background of the students, much more like Tier 2 and very intense for everybody.
All right, we have another question about whether we have videos available that exemplify the increased intensity of explicit instruction for students with disabilities.
You know what? I am going to be doing some videoing in different districts this year, and I will insist that I do some because we don't have a lot up on the website that are special ed classes, and I will be certain that we add to it before the end of this year. At this moment, not a lot, though we do have some, certainly have some good videos of me teaching Tier 2 with rewards plus, Tier 2 with Phonics for reading. I have one of those, and so I'll put those up on our videos so you have some special ed examples, and we will add to it.
Okay. I have another note that says, as a reading specialist, we are expected to keep up with the classroom, so we're teaching the same vocab, skills, and strategies at the same time. However, she finds the kids haven't mastered it, and she's expected to move on.
That would be frustrating. And so here's what I would do. Now, vocabulary is something that grows over your whole life. And so I would look at the words that you had to teach that everybody was learning in Tier 1, and I would ask myself the deep questions: which words are likely to be said in the future, read in the future, used in the future? And let's say there are 7 words, and I pick out like the 3 that I am going to teach to mastery. I am going to introduce it. We are going to practice it. We're going to come back and review it. We are going to put those words up on our word wall for intervention, and we are going to remember those. The others I give the light touch to. So I cover them but not in depth. It would be better to do that than cover them all lightly and have nothing. So pick those out. But at the same time, many times what happens is the areas that the students are low in are ones no longer covered. Let's say she is working with 4th graders and the 4th graders aren't firm on their short vowels. Well, we better fill in that gap because it's going to be a gap forever if we don't do it. So we might do some things that flow right into the lesson they're taking in general ed, and some that are foundation skills that they need, because Tier 2 and Tier 3, one of the differences is it's not just the standards that guide us, it is the students' need that guide us.
Okay. I have another note, kind of a twofold note. One, saying that she's had some trouble downloading videos from the Explicit Instruction website, but also inquiring about the 3rd grade video example that you shared at the Iowa Literacy Summit and whether or not they could get access to that video.
Will you tell them to email me directly? I've had no one report difficulty downloading anything from explicitinstruction.com or .org. I almost made a mistake there, explicitinstruction.org. So I will look into that with my videographer and my webmaster. But the person who would like that video from Iowa, probably Rhonda, have her email me and I will put it on BoxNet so she can get it.
Terrific.
Perfect.
All right. Do we have any other questions at the moment?
Well, if you have questions specific, you know what I'm going to cover next time, you may say, oh, I would really like to know what additional scaffolding you would do on story problems, or I would like more idea of what you would do if the kids weren't retaining this. You email me that, I will include it. So this is your time, archerteach@AOL.com, archerteach@AOL.com, that you could send me what you want to know about in terms of scaffolding.
Terrific. There's one last question, and this you may be touching on next time.
Yes.
It said, I really liked what you said about using diagnostic assessment to determine the stuff that you need to teach at Tier 2 and Tier 3. Can you expand on that?
So that is one you're going to send me that question. I will start that with a review question at the beginning because I noticed I just looked up at the clock and said, oh my goodness, so we started late. Some of you have places to be. And I always promise I won't keep you afterwards. So that one we will add at the very beginning.
Terrific. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We really do appreciate your patience while we got things started today. Anita, thanks for carving out time out of your training day in Wichita.
Well, and I really do. I am so glad that my hotel was close and that their internet was up and flying. This was good.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
have a
everyone.
great school year.
We will send the link out to the recording tomorrow for everybody. And if you have questions, please feel free to email them on to Anita or to myself, and we'll make sure to get them to Anita.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.